Let's take a look at some of the updated features of Tidradio's H3 FM Ham HT. I did a review of Tidradio's new H3 Ham HT a couple of months ago. Since then, Tidradio has made some changes to the firmware and published some explicit instructions on features that were always alluded to, but I hadn't been able to figure out. Let's take a look. As we get started, let me welcome you to the Gadget Talk channel, where we do reviews and how-tos on a variety of electronic gadgets that catch my eye. Be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I really appreciate it. The H3 is a fairly new release and one of my favorites in the budget HT category. Despite the fact that Tidradio provided the radio we'll be using today, they had no input into the contents of this video. If you're looking for an in-depth review of the H3, please take a look at my previous video that I'll link to in the end card of this video and in the description. This video is going to focus on a couple of features and updates as opposed to repeating all the stuff in the previous video. What remains the same is what comes in the box: the screen display, how the menus work, as well as what the various buttons do. If you've watched some of my recent ham radio reviews, you already know that one of the things I tend to focus on is signal purity. Like the sample in my previous H3 video, this H3 also has a nice clean signal. Here are a couple of photos of the 2-meter signal on my Tiny SA. The Tiny SA has a low and high range, so the second photo is where you'd find the third and higher harmonics. There have been several firmware updates recently. In fact, there have been 3 in the last few weeks. There was one on February 29th, 2024, one on March 21st, and the most recent was April 1st. We'll be going over the firmware update process in a minute, but in the last few updates there have been some significant changes. These updates include the following items. First, the number 5 key now works as it was supposed to. That is, it's a reverse key for swapping the repeater input and output frequencies in your radio. When pressed, an R icon will appear on the screen. Next, while it may be smart to turn on the screen before transmitting to make sure you're on the frequency you want, there is no need to do that. Whether the screen is on or off, the radio will transmit immediately on the selected band or frequency when the PTT is pressed. Next, the flashlight will illuminate regardless of whether or not the keyboard is locked. Squelch was adjusted so that the 0 setting will remove all squelch attenuation. Menu 40 allows you to shorten the time associated with this squelch tail elimination. Number 6 is a biggie. The latest firmware opens the receiver to receive down to 18 megahertz. The previous limit was 50 megahertz. This opens up the 10-meter band as well as the U.S. Citizens band area. CB isn't too busy near me, so I haven't heard any traffic yet. Keep in mind that menu 48 turns on the AM receive function of the receiver. I don't know if that works on CB or not. You may remember that CB has 3 authorized signal modes. Those are AM, single sideband, and most recently, FM. The last 2 changes have to deal with scanning and DTMF speeds. I really haven't messed with those things, so I can't comment. The last couple of updates have included 8 additional menu items. The top menu item is now item 56. The important updates here are that depending on where you live, you can enable transmit in the 200 megahertz range, the 350 megahertz range, and the 500 megahertz range. I transmitted into a dummy load and found that the radio did transmit on those frequencies. Remember, The stock antenna is a dual band 2 meter and 70 centimeter antenna, so SWR in those other bands will likely be atrocious. If you're in the US, you might want to enable the 200 megahertz band, but would also likely want to get a tri-band antenna or at least switch out with a 1.25 meter antenna if you plan to operate there. The last thing that's enabled is explained in some marketing material that Tidradio sent me, and it was a feature mentioned since the first release. I hadn't figured it out, but with the instructions, it was easy and a very cool feature. That feature is wireless copy. While scanning and copying a single channel has been around for a while, this feature allows you to copy the entire set of radio variables, not just channels, to another radio. This only works between H3 radios, but if you have several or if you have a friend that gets one, you'll be able to clone your radios quickly and easily. Let's take a look. So here's how the wireless copy works with these radios. So I'm going to use this green radio, which is the one that Tidradio just sent me. I've got both of these updated to the April 1st firmware. And so I want to point out just a couple of things as we get started. First is the push to talk B, push to talk C. So it's the little button here when you see in the instructions to press push to talk C. And so what we're going to be doing then is pushing the push to talk C and turning on the radio. And you see it comes up with the word wireless copy. Now we're going to do the very same thing with this radio. Push the third button down, turn it on. And again, it says wireless copy. Now, to start the copying, I'm going to push the push to talk C button on this green radio because I want to transfer the data from the green radio to the black radio. And I'm going to take just a second here and reposition my microphone so you can hear the hissing that occurs during the course of the transfer. So now with all the transferring complete, all the information that was here in the green radio is now here also in the black radio. And again, they've got the same firmware, and so I could have transferred the other way just as easily. Now, I also went through and reviewed the audio, and I think when I moved my mic, I pressed the mute button, so you didn't hear the hissing between them, but know that there's just a little squelch kind of sound when the transmitting and the receiving are bouncing back and forth between the radios. As you can see, that feature is pretty cool. Just remember to press the PTT-C key on the radio you want to transmit the information. The radio you don't press the PTT-C key on is the one that will accept the new settings. In case you're wondering, I don't know the frequency the radio uses to do that cloning. I do know it's not the frequency set in the VFO, though. Hey, just a quick break to let you know that you can support the Gadget Talk channel by using Buy Me a Coffee. It's a crowdsourcing platform where viewers can make one-time donations or become members of the Gadget Talk community. Your support helps provide resources to purchase some of the items reviewed on the channel. I'll put a link in the description below this video. Now, back to our topic. Now, let's do an abbreviated review of how to update the firmware. First, download the latest firmware from Tidradio. The software site is called walkietalkiesoftware.com. You'll need to sign in to initiate a download. Next, put the zip file in a folder where you keep your H3 files and unzip it there. Since there have been several updates lately, I set up a new folder in my H3 folder for each update. There are 2 file folders in the zip file, one for Windows, and I believe the other is for Macs. Now that's pretty cool, as most factory CPSs and upgrade apps don't work with Macs. Check the dates on the firmware updater and CPS against those programs you might already be using. Replace the old programs with the newest date. You can use the About icon in the updater and CPS to see the version numbers. Now for the firmware. Open and read the README document. The firmware updater won't work if you don't do things in the proper order. The biggest error folks make is not waiting to turn on the radio until they hit the start button in the updater. Connect the programming cable to your PC. Note the COM port using the device manager in Windows. Open the firmware updater. Click the COM icon and select the radio's COM port that you saw in the device manager. In the middle of the display, click the Open button and navigate to where the new .bin file is and select it. Once selected, click the Start button and then turn on the radio while pressing the PTT button. You'll see a progress bar at the bottom of the updater move across the screen. The update will only take about 8 to 10 seconds. When the app says Finished, click the Finish button. Turn off the radio, and you're all set. As I think I mentioned in my previous video on the H3, this is a radio that's hard not to like. Its small size, full feature set, clean signal, and low price make this one of the best budget FM Ham HTs in the market today. With some serious missteps in terms of signal purity by one of the big players in this market, this H3 needs to be high on your list when thinking about a first radio or just a new radio. As I said before, this radio was provided by Tidradio, but a cool radio is a cool radio, regardless of the circumstances. And the H3 is definitely a cool radio. As always, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Join me over here for the earlier full review of the Tidradio H3. Thanks for watching, and 73.